So my name is Philip Martin, and I am the co-owner of Philip Martin Gallery here in Los Angeles with my partner, Portia Hine. I hope you've had a chance to meet Portia either here at the gallery in our location in Glassell Park or at the fairs. And I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with Kristy Luck on the occasion of her exhibition Close to the Verb. The show actually closes on Saturday, so I was really excited that Kristy could squeak in a moment here with us. So she's joining us from her studio in Los Angeles. And so thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing, Kristy?
Good.
Thanks so much for taking the time to talk about your show. So, it's really exciting to be putting together this body of work, and there's a lot of really interesting things that are going on. So I maybe thought we could start by, I could ask just the title, Close to the Verb. Where does that come from?
It's something I don't know. It's a phrase that sort of came to me when I was trying to consider a way of, I guess, accessing like a huge amount of indeterminacy to like what's occurring, but to specify a sort of intimate positioning of that something would occur, which is how a lot of the images function, in a way where could be multiple entry points that are possible and credible. I think, yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about your process that you've gone through to get to this sort of place of multiple entry points and how that works?
Yeah. I guess one way, like, I'm really interested in film. So like if we were to use the example of like watching a film, like a mystery, like I love the movie The White Ribbon. Have you seen that?
I have not.
Okay. Well, it's creating images, I think, for me, I think a lot about language and then story. Where does like the way that we start to create a narrative begin? And I think specifically with painting, like every art form has like its freedom that it allows the spectator. So with writing, maybe the freedom is the freedom to imagine an image that's not there. But with visual, I'm trying to lean into what is the freedom that I can allow the spectator to have that's always there, but that becomes more potent, which is the freedom to like just decide what language you're going to like begin to apply to the image. And I think, yeah, so like using the film example, a mystery becomes maybe like meaningful when you have multiple possibilities that are credible versus like one possibility that is overtly obvious or just like no possibilities, and it's sort of meaningless. So positioning the sort of viewer or spectator to look at an image and have multiple entry points that could be possible, and that they're sort of positioned in a way that if they begin to apply language to it, they're automatically limiting there's an awareness that they're limiting what could be there.
Yes, I would say that is a remarkable aspect of your work to me, which is that when I'm looking at the paintings, I find that, my kind of impulsive and instinctive urges to try to tell myself that I know what's happening, to try to step in there and grasp something, the longer I can put that off, the longer I can allow myself to look at all the different aspects of the painting and how things are relating, they really meet you in terms of finding feeling and emotion and interiority without naming, in a way. But it's a remarkable process.
Yeah, thanks. I think I guess the process to making a group of work is that like the image comes last. So I do have like limitations that I work within, but I don't think of I love Forrest best and like the symbols that they used. I do have, I mean, if as people have pointed out to me, there are like reoccurring sort of edges or ways of touch and attention that are intentionally reoccurring. But I hesitate to say that like my limitations or my rules are a key to understanding it, that like that there is going to inevitably be a sort of like answer or something. So it's more like there's a determinate how that reoccurs, but like an indeterminate what. And so the fact that the image comes last is important because I don't know what the image will be, but I begin all of the work at the same time, and I begin all of the work intentionally. That the layouts or the sort of very general compositions are intentionally different. So I'm not relying on like a kind of like formal like compositional similarity at the beginning, intentionally so that the work is very far apart. And then as I continue, they get pushed together. And so there ends up being these gaps, this sort of gaps between them, but there's still like a resonance. So I think that's important to mention, that they begin far apart and that they are not predetermined. Like for me is like an exercise in or me like just in a practical way, cultivating this like relationship to uncertainty. I think it's like I have to embody it if I'm going to say that it's important. So that it's like I can't say that the indeterminacy and uncertainty of knowing is like valuable and then like plan it, So does that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense. And there's a lot to kind of unpack there. I'm kind of struck by your comment that if you want to say something's important in a certain sense, you have to embody it. I mean, that's hardcore.
Sure.
Do you want to go back and talk about this piece? This piece is called the Unstressed Vowel. It's a 3-panel work, meaning that the left and right sections are separate canvases, with the center section, the 3 of them come together to form a syntactical kind of unit, maybe as suggested by the title, perhaps.
The Unstressed Vowel is one piece that I mean, in the exhibition, there's a couple paintings that reference a sort of like language. thinking of language or thinking of words, and how we encounter them is something that reoccurs. And so with this one, thinking of the unstressed vowel, which is like a letter in a word that when spoken is like barely audible, or like that you can't hear. It's not part of the pronunciation, but it is visually on the page and helps provide the meaning of the word. So it's just another entry point into like what is sort of lost or limiting about speaking, about like starting to apply language to a visual thing. Yeah. So this piece was sort of an attempt at making the singular like visual element really potent.
Yeah.
The
It's interesting to hear you say that. So you see the vowel, so it helps you organize this thing in front of you on the page and even hearing it. But then it's not actually pronounced in a very audible way. That's a really that's a really fascinating idea, with regard to how the mind is putting things together. Another question is, you've always been very interested in tool usage. And I remember, a conversation about how to make tool usage kind of obvious. And this piece, at the bottom, top and bottom, you sort of have some moments also with things that seem to be, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. In the past, I've attempted to make my own brushes, like going after a specific kind of mark at a certain scale. But while I do have like these reoccurring areas always in my paintings of creating light, like a sort of soft light, or these sort of a glow or a gradient, that for me is like representing, like it's like a guide, I guess. It's a guide to where you're looking in the work. I think highlighting like a sensory, or even a sort of like erotic, or like eros, like a life life activity. But I don't want the painting, like these aspects, to be like a tight illusion. Like I want them to subtly like reveal themselves. I want it to be visible that it's a painting that I made, and that like there's hairs that are like creating these things. So maybe not in every inch of the painting, but always in some aspect of the painting is it's like a little bit, you can tell that it's a surface that has been touched.
And the paint application is so thoughtful, and you really have your own system that you've kind of built up in terms of creating spaces and creating volumes. And you've described yourself in the past as you're kind of in that space, almost learning about these spaces as you're actually rendering them, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting with edges, or I guess you say line, like the forms that reoccur aren't necessarily like representational forms. Like, I don't know, the last show that I did at your space, I had used specific objects from my mom. So like some of the forms that now, years later, are still entering the works began from those forms, even though they're like disarticulated from a source. explicitly. So they're still there, but the way that I see them is and use them is that they're an edge, or they're the way that things are meeting up, the way that, so like the sort of hard edged like stairs. I hesitate to say stairs because I don't want to, like,
Right.
for the sake of this. Yeah, so that I'm using those edges, those details, and creating a relationship on either side of them that sort of works with and against a clear, sort of clear read. But
Yeah. This one actually is an interesting, there's an interesting question here that someone's asked about, if you might want to talk a little bit more with this painting as an example of the more frequent presence of stronger geometric lines or structures in a work kind of alongside and a more organic or bodily kind of organic forms.
Yeah, those are always both included for the most part. I think that they like tend to undo the, I think that they like both create and then undo a sort of like tension. So, which is another, sometimes in paintings, how I'm like, how the imagery is formed is like having an overt association, like this looks like this. Now I'm going to undo that association, but like still leave enough trace of it for a viewer, for it to come up in your mind.
Yeah.
To like have it subtly there and not there. And then I keep doing that in different ways throughout the whole work. So that, yeah.
So is that a process of something feels kind of strong and then maybe you subvert it or create a new entryway to go back to a previous idea that then allows that thing to be flexible and readable, but maybe not definable?
Yeah, I somewhat, but I think that like my version of what strong is not necessarily what someone else's would be, because I'm really careful about like what I'm evoking. And so like strong for me, I think I've said this to you before, and like I like sometimes showing paintings in progress to friends or family.
Yeah.
Or to like,
Yeah.
I am not one to like talk about what I'm doing. I want to hear what other people are thinking, what they're associating.
Yeah.
So I'll ask a group sort of like, what are the associations that are coming to you? And it can be, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
If they all answered the same thing, I would know it's overt.
Yeah.
Or even if it overlaps slightly, I would know that there's something overt there.
Yeah. And what I recall in that conversation was that you said that you kind of know a painting is done when everyone walks away with it with totally different ideas of what it is.
Hopefully, yeah. Or hopefully like a personal, yeah. I think like if it can get to a space that feels, I don't know, I mean, like this is very abstract, but if it can get to a place that is like, feels intimate, then it almost has to be different from another person.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, which hinges on like what I am, I don't know, like circling, I guess, which is like, like a kind of, I don't know, like unknowability, but how do I make that like active?
Well, this piece is called Pulsion, which suggests energy, and it has a very energetic feel in person. This work that is called Rise of Thought. And there's a couple that are coming.
No, that one's Issue of Insight.
Oh, my apologies. You know what? I'm
But that's
no, I just am so I'm so old and blind now. Sometimes I'm just I literally I'm trying to read it, totally reading it. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this, about Issue of Insight?
Sure, yeah. This one does have like a sort of motif that has carried through the work of this sort of form, compressed in a small space. This one has, I mean, this is the first time I've done a move on the right side. In a lot of them, I began, I guess, thinking of having an activity that goes from right to left.
Yeah.
That there would be a subtle move from right to left that goes against reading.
Yeah.
And so this one sort of kept that. Some of them it lost it, but I don't know. I've wanted there to be an area that you could really project into, whether something is a lack or like an opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, whether it's like, yeah, just to leave that there, and also to have, I guess, to create a sort of uncomfortable, I guess for me, it's like, gives me like a like a feeling to have this like hard-edged thing,
Yeah.
At the core of a sort of organic, animal-like abstraction, or this like creature-like thing. I don't know. I was thinking of it as like a belief, maybe. A belief that's like counter to.
It also makes me think of the Unstressed Vowel piece that we were looking at in terms of reading. And that's an interesting idea, whether you're maybe oriented by English or a Romance language and you're reading left to right, or maybe you're oriented by Arabic or Hebrew and you're reading right to left. That's very interesting as to whether you're, as you say, landing on something or starting on something. I had not thought of that. Now we just have a couple minutes left. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you might like to talk about so far?
I don't think so. Less is more.
Yeah, of course. Well, we just have a couple more pieces here. The last show is day of the show is Saturday, so tomorrow. So do come by if you haven't seen the show and you might like to. If you have any questions about anything that we've looked at thus far or the show work, feel free to send me an email. Kristy, it's really wonderful to talk with you today, and I really appreciate your taking the time to talk more about your work. And of course, it's just such a delight to be doing the exhibition with you.
Thanks for doing this.
Good. We'll also have some work by Kristy Luck coming up at the Armory here in September. So there's lots of stuff going on for Kristy. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.